All right, YouTube, when the so-called left in the United States blames like the evil capitalism for all of the problems in the world, they're not actually correct. What they really should be blaming is the government, because the government has created a corporate structure in which monopolies can actually exist because there's no free market to provide for equal competition. What you've got in the Western world right now is that governments throw free money all the time, subsidies, grants, projects, and stuff like that, at corporate firms that happen to have donated to their political campaigns. And then small businesses and upstarts, they can't compete with the corporations because those corporations are getting like free money and stuff. And sometimes a profit is turned, yes, and sometimes you're getting, a decent product, but at the same time you're not getting real competition. It's not really a free market. It's not really capitalism. No, so it's really a straw man. When all the socialists, they say, well, socialism is going to be the future because of automation. It's going to take tens of millions of jobs in the United States. We've had automation for a very long time, and that never happened. What caused those manufacturing jobs to dry up was globalism and government interventionism. Government protecting corporate monopolies is what caused those jobs to dry up in the first place. It wasn't the free market that did that, because the only reason why demand for those jobs in the US fell by the wayside in the first place is because government made it too expensive, too burdensome for companies in this hemisphere to actually continue operating. So it all got sent over to Africa or Southeast Asia or something like that. It's gotten to the point China's making the same mistake now. The Chinese people, their middle class expanding, starting to consume, luxury goods. They don't even seem to realize the Chinese government right now is doing the same fucking thing in Eastern Africa. It's the new colonialism. I've spoken of this before. East Africa is now overrun by hundreds of thousands of Chinese middle management figures that are using Africans as slave labor at this point to create even cheaper products, because now they're starting to need to import them into China, and people in some of the marginal working and middle class, they can't afford their own Chinese consumer goods anymore. They can only export them, so they have to make them elsewhere in order to prop up both parts of their economy, the consumer side and the export side. And it's all very amusing to watch China position itself in such a way, because it's making the same mistakes that our government's made. They're going to suffer for it long term. For right now, though, it makes them look, I guess, like a juggernaut, so they can keep justifying foreign investment. But it won't be automation fucking around with the working class jobs of this country. That's what they'll blame it on. The globalists, the neocons and neolibs will blame automation for the problems that are about to arrive, but it won't be automation causing those problems. It will be corporate monopolies causing those problems. There is no fundamental reason why we cannot structure the U.S. economy in such a way, through our tax code and everything else, that we can't compete with all of these other nations. We have the technology right now to do it. Automation is actually an intrinsic part of that. Like, what if you had a fully automated factory and you slapped nothing but solar panels on the roof so that you never even needed to provide any electricity for that automation? It'd be so smooth, it'd be so streamlined and efficient, it'd be wonderful. It'd be a testament to our capabilities, but the government doesn't want that to happen. The government doesn't want to see the shitty jobs get eliminated and taken up by essentially robotic, like AI systems, so that other people can actually have gainful employment. There's plenty of room for that gainful employment, but a lot of those jobs have been destroyed in this country. The government of the United States destroyed those jobs willingly in order to re-import goods that would be more inexpensive. What the government did is it said, U.S. goods are really high quality, they're wonderful, but they're also more highly priced. We've got an idea. We'll strangulate the economy. We'll make sure that those jobs move overseas, so we'll have millions of people out of work or underemployed. Put them on the dole so that they always vote for us. They're good, willing sheep, good, willing slaves. And then they're making a lot less money, but we can re-import all those goods, and so they'll cost a lot less. They'll be crappier. They'll be foreign made. But then we can tax them. They have a sales tax. We make back almost as much, really, as those people are getting from the dole. And so the government enriches itself. The corporations get rich doing this. And that's really what it's all about. Some U.S. firm puts up a factory in Mexico or China. Then the goods are re-imported. Now, what Trump's been talking about is a way to stop this. provide for a tariff on all imported goods from firms that are U.S. run, essentially. Right now, some U.S. company, most of their manufacturing happens in China or somewhere else, or in Nigeria or something like that, and they simply re-import those goods as part of their overall corporate complex at a much cheaper rate. The problem is, despite the fact that the goods are cheaper, the workers here are making less. There are a lot fewer of them. Most of them are now unemployed. They used to have good middle-class jobs. They had their own working-class home. They had their piece of property. They had their car. This is the way it was back in like the nifty 50s or something, which was partially due to the fact that we destroyed all the factories in continental Europe at the time, and Russia was hemorrhaging people, and they had famines, and the UK had been bombed, and so forth. So there wasn't a huge amount of competition in most parts of the world. But at the same time, the structure that we used, the pro-Americana sort of nifty 50s into the sweet 60s mentality, it actually, economically speaking, it worked. Yeah, there were definitely problems at the time, like the business tax rate was still high and so forth. But we can restructure all of this, take care of this problem. Automation won't be the problem. The problem will be if we continue with the stupid economic mentality we're currently operating under. We will continue to lose more middle-class jobs here. You'll have a nation. The Democrats talking about the haves and the have-nots. Oh, these 8 people are as rich as half the world. Yeah, that's because of monopolization, which was empowered into existence post-Gilded Age by people with your policies. What we should have done at the end of the Gilded Age to stop barons from price fixing and trusts and all of that other crap is not progressive era, is not pass a bunch of new laws to give the government more influence over the economic structure. That led directly to the Depression, believe it or not. A lot of people want to blame the free market for that too. No, it was government intervention that led to the Great Depression, and which kept it from being solved more quickly. We were destroying crops in the fields, paying farmers to literally dump their milk out and let the grapes rot on the vine. You look at the Grapes of Wrath, you get this general view. And what they should have done is just ban monopolization, ban grants and carpetbagging and things of that nature, which were causing problems, through a constitutional amendment. It would have been as simple as that. One bureau could have handled the entire load instead of the bureaucratic complex that we have now. It would have been simpler, it would have been cheaper, it would have led to more long-term success, you would have had less statism, it would have been, like I said, cheaper, so you wouldn't have to pay through the nose to provide for all these alphabet soup agencies that are involved somehow with commerce or whatever. It would have been much better. But automation is not going to cause the next great problem. People talk about self-driving cars, so there are no taxis. People who are in like public works, like a bus driver or something, they'll be out. And drone deliveries, so you won't have like USPS or FedEx anymore. Those will be falling by the wayside. No, these businesses will simply adapt. It'll open up new jobs, but not under the current economic structure that we use, because there will be no reason for any corporation to open up new jobs. There'll be no reason for it. Socialism's not the answer. What they're trying to do is force socialism off on people by making them desperate. Now, the government will be the ones fucking with them, destroying the good jobs and making them desperate in the first place. They'll be the ones doing that. Because we've had boosts in automation before. We're talking like back in the cotton gin era. Did it cause massive waves of unemployment then? No, it didn't. When we started using assembly lines, did it cause unemployment to rise to 90%? No, it didn't. Robotics won't do that either unless we allow the government to actually be the cause of it through monopolization, through corporatism, which is not capitalism. Corporatism only exists in the first place because of the whims of big government. It's the opposite of capitalism. It's much more in common with socialism than anything else. That's the problem. I don't fear automation. Robots, I can't imagine are going to be too good at writing creative books. So I'm probably fine anyway, but at the same time, yeah, there are going to be a lot of people unemployed and underemployed for a very long time. Unless we nip this in the bud now, what we need to do is eliminate government intervention. We need to eliminate these so-called free trade deals that have nothing to do with free trade. We do need a tariff on re-imported goods by U.S. firms. I'm not talking about, we're going to slap a tariff on Chinese rice exports or something. If it's actually being made in China, grown in China, produced in China, that's a totally different story. What we're talking about is U.S. firms closing down operations here and building factories overseas, making the same thing, re-importing it en masse, and reselling it at a lower price, but they don't care that it's at a lower price because they're paying their workers so much less because their workers aren't in the U.S. That's the problem. It's not, oh, we're going to tariff everything. It's we're going to tariff re-imports. Because that's what we should be doing. Because we should be encouraging those businesses to stay in the United States. If that's the only way to accomplish it, who cares? Nobody's talking about a complete and utter tariff on all other nations, on all goods. I'm talking about things we could easily make here in the United States. For a lot of our history, much of our income as a nation was just tariff-based early on. Other endeavors weren't taxed at the time. It didn't exist. And we did just fine. We continued to expand. Our birth rates were high. We kept to the steady march of progress went on. And magically we did this without all the bureaus we have today. We didn't have a strong central government. We didn't have, for some time, even a standing military, and yet we did fine. In fact, for a long time, we did better than we're doing now. The Gilded Age was the final age in which capitalism existed. Now, I think that they could have simply reformed the protection of capitalism at the constitutional level. You wouldn't have needed any socialism. It wouldn't have been necessary. It could have been easily accomplished. They didn't think to do that. Instead, TDR and all the others get in and force the progressive era. Now, I like Teddy Roosevelt. I have no problem with him. Larger-than-life figure, yeah, Panama Canal, Rough Riders, naval maneuvers. Great man. Also a very charismatic figure, but at the same time, the progressive era was a good idea on paper that had noble motives behind it. I don't question Teddy Roosevelt's motives, but the end result after the progressive era began to wane was worse than the Gilded Age had ever been. It caused the Great Depression. It caused many of the problems that we had. It wasn't a lack of oversight that caused the Great Depression. It was speculation made possible by government interventionism and priming the pump and things of that nature. That's what caused it. It had nothing to do with, private business people decided to fuck with the economy. They decided to collapse it into the ground. Largely, it was speculation driven. It was bank driven. Banks backed by the government at that point. Therein lies your problem. Automation is not some boogeyman. We've had it anyway. We've been using automation in most warehouses and factories, mines, and everything else for 50 years, sometimes a century. In some instances, it goes back almost a century and a half to nearly full automation where one machine that's been developed, some cotton gin, replaces 20, 30 workers. It helped end slavery, for Christ's sakes. Slavery was largely ended because it no longer made economic sense, not because of any morality involved. Most of the people who wanted to eliminate it wanted to send all former slaves back to Africa, to Liberia. Abe Lincoln was one of them. He never even envisioned a scenario in which these individuals would gain citizenship. Most of them were members of the same groups that said, this doesn't need to be happening in the country. Slavery's retarded. It doesn't make economic sense. It's kind of sad when you think of it. Why can't they go back and be where they were from to begin with? They should go and have their own cultures like they were part of before. And the idea that you can perpetually own a whole human lineage just didn't make sense to them. And it doesn't make sense to anybody, I think, at this point. And so they end that, and then other people come in, of course, and then they have like equal rights and voting and stuff. But that was never in their heads at the time. The basic concept was economic. It was we've got factories now. We've got all these looms and cotton gins. Why do we fucking need slavery? It just doesn't make any sense. And then the South kept with that sort of mode of reasoning because they wanted to, I guess, rape their slaves or something because they were degenerates at the time. And so the union's like, well, what the fuck's going on here? It just doesn't make any sense. So that's really what it's about. Automation is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. It takes the shittiest of jobs and divorces humans from having to do them. As long as you've got an economic structure with enough entrepreneurs and enough competition to maximize efficiency so that new businesses can spring up to offer better jobs based on that much larger economic base that you've just created through automation. You've made it more efficient, you've made it quicker, you've made it more streamlined, you're producing more, you're synthesizing goods more. That should lead to a larger economy if you can grow your economy. But because of the economic structure we use, we can't grow right now very well. China's growing, Mexico's growing, all these other economies are growing. Why can't ours grow? What, are we not smart enough? We don't have enough resources, enough of a population base? I should think better of ourselves. I think we can probably make it work. But first we got to get government out of the way. We do have to reform the business tax code. We do have to tariff-free imports. It is necessary. If we want to take the next big technological leap into being a much more powerful nation than we are now, we've got to do that. We can't just slide off and say, okay, well, we'll socialize everything. And so government will control everything, and rights will become privileges, and we'll be sort of in a dystopian sort of like French-style nation or something like that. That won't work. It'll be a recipe for misery and stagnation. We've seen it before. We see it happening in Western Europe right now. That's about all. Peace out.